So much media, so little time. Who keeps track of it all? That would be me. This is Bob Andelman, and this is a Mr. Media interview, broadcast and recorded live on blogtalkradio.com from the new media and baseball capital of the world, St. Petersburg, Florida. I love a good trade show. There's something about all the people with common interests gathered together in one location, eating overpriced, stale concessions while trading information and experiences, attending educational seminars, gossiping about their industry. That's why I'm hoping that come October 2009, I'll be one of the thousands in Las Vegas attending BlogWorld and New Media Expo. This year's show is extra special because it represents the merging of two previously separate shows, Rick Calvert's BlogWorld Expo and Tim Bourquin's New Media Expo. Joining me today are Rick and Tim, who I hope will tell us about the decision to bring their competing shows under one tent, as well as discuss the state of blogging and new media. Guys, welcome to Mr. Media.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Bob.
Glad you could join us today. Sometimes it's a mystery until I turn those mics on exactly who I have on. So I'm assuming that Rick and Tim, you're both here.
Yep, we're here.
Excellent.
Yep, you've got Rick and Tim both here.
So the announcement on December 8th that BlogWorld had acquired New Media Expo was a surprise, but I think for most people not an unwelcome one. And I wondered if each of you, I guess starting with Rick, could tell us a little bit about what was behind the move.
Well, when we originally started BlogWorld, excuse me, I'm fighting a cold here. I was unaware, actually, that Tim had already started his event, or I would have contacted him before then. But at the very beginning, I went up to Tim at his, I think that year, Tim, it was called Podcast and New Media Expo, right? Or was it?
I think it was Podcast and New Media Expo. It's had 4 years, 4 different names, so it's...
Yeah. So I went up and said, hey, we're getting ready to launch this event, and we'd known each other previously, and I said, maybe we can work together in the future. So we really started from the moment we announced BlogWorld trying to figure out a way that we could work together because we saw the synergy, and so finally it all came together.
Oh, where's the palace intrigue? Tell me more.
Rick's being modest, though, too. I mean, he started a show. I mean, he's an entrepreneur like I am and started BlogWorld out of basically nothing and turned it into this fantastic event. And it was going on our 4th year of doing it, and we had broadened our show, New Media Expo, a little bit to include online video, but not blogging. But most podcasters, if they don't run their actual podcast on a blog, have a separate blog. And so it just made a lot of sense. I mean, Rick, we talked about doing something, but because, we have to sign these contracts so far out in terms of space at the convention centers and things, we didn't really get a chance to really talk about what the possibilities were until more recently. And part of it is me. Part of it is because being the entrepreneur that I am, I tend to, for the past 10 years and owning different shows and starting different shows, I'm very good at starting things, and I love to see the excitement of starting a show and going to that first one and seeing people get together for the first time. I'm not that great at the management of it, and so 4 years is about a point where a show has gone through its kind of startup phase and is ready to be taken to the next level by somebody who really can do that because they can share that vision and kind of take it for you. So that's part of me saying, it's time that I think that, Rick could probably do and his team could do a better job than I could at taking this show forward. So that was the original impetus for me.
How many years did you actually compete?
2 years, I guess, because Tim's show was around 2 years before we started. So,
but we've known,
and honest. Go ahead, Tim.
I was going to say I've known Rick for a few years. We met at a trade show event, being in that industry a couple of years prior, so we'd known each other for a while.
I suspect. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, it was really, we both didn't really see each other as, I don't know, head-to-head competition. It was more of kind of a friendly relationship from the beginning, and Tim's event had a little bit different focus than our event did, and we had a different focus than his. But we were on this inevitable path, coming together as all kind of new media content creators become these multimedia content creators. You're not just a podcaster anymore, or just a blogger anymore, or at least that's more rare than it used to be. So again, our relationship was always amicable. We were always trying to figure out a way to, work together. But as Tim said, you have to commit to hotel contracts, to convention center contracts, and other things really a long ways in advance. So, it was our first year, and then it's a very hectic thing. Even though you've got a whole year to plan a show, it takes a lot of time, and every moment you're pretty much busy doing that. So,
and I suspect that most participants in this economic climate are probably relieved to only have one show to plan for. But was there much duplication in your attendee and exhibitor lists?
I'll start. Yeah, there wasn't too much overlap there was probably a little more overlap on the attendee side than there was on the exhibitors. But, there were people, each year was starting to get more and more so, where podcasting was just becoming another thing that people were throwing into the mix, along with blogging, along with social media, that you could see that it was going to start being more and more so. And we had exhibitors, Rick, I haven't talked to you specifically about this, but we've had exhibitors who came up to me and said, look, we'd really love you to go talk to Rick and try to figure something out, because for the exhibitors that are at both, it was tough, especially. And so to be able to do it in one place was helpful to them, too. So I think that's why people are happy about it, is because they don't have to make a choice, and certainly it saves money for exhibitors who were having to do both shows.
And we had a similar experience. I would say that we've had less attendee crossover, and again, the first year almost no attendee crossover, except for those hardcore new media people who go to kind of every conference that you can think of. This year there was more, and there was a little bit of exhibitor crossover as well, and we had the same experience as Tim. Some people that approached us and say, why don't you guys do some stuff together? And we kept telling them, we're trying. So, anyway, here we are.
I have to say, I have gotten the news blasts from Tim's group, and they've always been very interesting. I've always found them very useful. And Rick is very involved in LinkedIn Bloggers, a group online that I belong to, and here too I found the stuff that he has to say very useful. So very interesting to have these guys, you guys in the same place. How will this year's one show differ from the separate shows of, say, just a year ago, or this year, I should say?
I think the biggest difference of anything is that it'll just be bigger than either show has been in the past, and you'll have more people there. And then secondly, people will have more stuff to see on the exhibitor side, because again, there are quite a few exhibitors who didn't do both events. So people will see more products and services that they need, and then certainly the integration of the different mediums of the podcasting, the online video, the blogging. There'll definitely be a strong emphasis on integrating those things together.
And have there been any? Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
For a lot of companies, who are maybe waiting for a certain show to get to the kind of scale that it's going to have now. So I think that it'll kind of feed it on itself, and hopefully we'll have a lot more companies participating as well as attendees.
So let's talk that scale. How many people do you expect this year? How many exhibitors? How much space will you take up? All that kind of good stuff.
Well, with today's economy, who knows? We'll see. But honestly, we think that this economy doesn't affect us as much as some other traditional events, and both Tim and I have other events that we're involved in. I have one in the manufacturing sector that's definitely significantly affected by this. But to answer your question, I think it's pretty safe to say about 3,500 attendees, maybe more. And you'll probably see 150 exhibiting companies, again, maybe more. Total square footage, you're looking at 30,000, maybe 40,000 square feet, and again, 150 to 200 speakers at the event.
Can you guys announce any committed guests yet, or is it too soon?
It's certainly too soon for that. lots of people already who want to speak, but we haven't confirmed anybody yet.
Okay.
That's one of the most difficult things, Tim. I'm curious about that too. If you don't mind me asking Tim a question, Bob.
Sure. No, please.
One of the most difficult things is selecting the speakers because there's so many great, talented, popular people out there. You just can't make a space for every one of them.
It is tough, and we would get upwards of 600-700 requests for last year what was only 62 spaces. So you inevitably have to turn down people that are fantastic and would be great, but you just have to make really hard choices. And it's probably my least favorite week out of the year when I have to do that, because I have to tell some people who I consider friends that they've been turned down. So it's tough when you get to know so many people, and there's a lot of great people out there that have something to say. It's tough choices, but you always have to decide, what's going to be best. You are charging money for the people that are coming, so you have to say, what's going to be the best thing, what's going to be the best for the attendee. And my barometer was always, if this person attends this one session, will the entire show be worth it? And to get 60 of those, you get all those lined up, and you're going to have quite a show. So that was always our goal.
Well, let me open the door. I don't want to. Certainly, you guys can ask each other all the questions you like. But if any listeners want to give a call in and talk to Rick Calvert or Tim Bourquin. Tim, am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
Close enough. It's Bourquin, but you're doing
Bourquin.
fine. Yeah.
Bourquin. Let me write that down, and I'll try to get it correct next time. If you want to talk to these guys who are behind BlogWorld and New Media Expo, give us a call, 646-595-3135. So you're both still working the show. Who's doing what? How does the responsibility break down now that you're one operation?
Want me to go, Rick?
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
So, I'm sure I will be involved to a certain extent in terms of helping plan some of the podcasting tracks and talking about which speakers I think would be great, and kind of helping Rick with keeping the pulse on the industry itself and the topics that'll be important to people. I'll certainly be there for a long time, because I'm still doing the ironic thing about selling the podcast event is that I've got more time to do podcasts. So I'm more excited than ever to go to the show as an attendee too. So I'll still definitely be involved.
Yeah.
I know that feeling, by the way. It seems like running BlogWorld, not having any time to actually blog myself.
Yeah. Or go. I've had sessions that I said, I would love to go to that session that I just booked it, but I know that I won't be able to make it because there's two others I need to get to or meetings I have to attend. So I guess that's a good sign that if you want to go to your own conference, you're doing a pretty good job, hopefully.
Fair point. We've got a call. Let's see what's going on here. Heidi, I think. Heidi, you have a question for Rick or Tim?
Yeah, how you doing? This is Jesse from Long Island.
Hey, Jesse. Thanks for calling.
Hey, Jesse.
How you doing? I just wanted to know, when you first started coming up with the idea, was there any negative feedbacks or any things that set you guys back?
Tim?
So, negative feedback about the putting the shows together?
Yeah, about BlogWorld in general. Mm-hmm.
Well, everybody I've talked to is pleased about it. I think if there was any people that had any concern, it was that if they thought the podcasting might get lost in the blogging aspect of it. But I think that what I always told them was, look, the podcasting is certainly going to be important going forward, and so that's not going to be the case. And that was just maybe one or two Twitters or posts that I heard. But overall, it was, Rick can maybe add to this too, but it was just really positive. People were glad that they were going to do it all in one place.
Yeah. I always pay quite a bit of attention to any negative feedback we get in any aspect, and so I maybe emphasize it too much because it's really important to me that we put on as quality of event as possible, and people really come away with it, believing that they got their money's worth. But the response has been so overwhelmingly positive. It just makes sense. Now, as Tim said, anything that is negative, I guess there's two things that I've seen. Number one, podcasters concerned that podcasting won't get the focus that it deserves, and we're very mindful of that, and very mindful that needs to be represented, hopefully as well as Tim has done it at his event for the last 4 years. And then the other one is something that we just can't control, is a few people who don't like Las Vegas. And, you know, the fact is Las Vegas is the number one trade show city in the world. Attendance goes up when shows move to Las Vegas on average of 20%. It's the second cheapest city in the country to fly into. There's no city in the world that has the hotel value that you get in Las Vegas. Any 2-star hotel in Vegas is a 5-star hotel anywhere else in the world. And, you know, that's why the event is there. And so there are always, and I understand why, there's some people who just hate Las Vegas.
Right.
There's nothing we can do about that. And after BlogWorld last year, that was the negative post we got, was a woman who hated Las Vegas. I'm like, sorry, most people love it. So
right.
And that comes too from Podcast Expo first starting out in Ontario, where
yes.
nothing to do. There's maybe 2 restaurants in the whole place, and so they felt those first couple of years that you know, we basically took over that 4-block area, and it was podcast land for 3 days, which was fantastic. But at the same time, I knew that first show for sure, and maybe even the second show, I knew everybody that was at that show by first name. And if I didn't know their first name, I certainly knew their podcast. And, you know, when an industry grows, and I've seen that with a couple other shows we started, you just can't sustain that. At some point, you're going to get bigger than, you know, the industry is going to get bigger than you are. So, you know, I think it's just kind of inevitable.
Jesse, I'm just curious. Are you a blogger or a podcaster yourself?
I do blog. I'm interested in podcasting, but I haven't come around to it yet.
Do you want to plug your blog while you're here?
Sure. It's.
Guess we're not going to find out.
What do you got for the plug?
Call us back if you want to get the plug in. I'll remember the number and we'll get you in there. That does open up a line if anyone would like to give us a call and talk to Rick and Tim. 646-595-3135. Yeah, you know, I'm glad that it's one show. Mr. Media is, in my mind, is a blog and a podcast, and to choose to go to both would be difficult. And I've committed that this year is going to be the year I'm going to make it to the show, or to go to one or the other would be hard because I don't know exactly where I would fit in if I had to choose. So it's great to me that it's in one place and one show.
And it's harder to keep track now of people have blogs, podcasts, they do blog comments, Twitter takes up, I'm constantly floored by how much time people seem to have to do all this stuff, and it's starting to getting to be where you need a convention and you need some conference education to figure out the best way to do it all because there's just so much out there.
The first and only show I've been to was something called Blog Orlando in October, and we actually did a live Mr. Media broadcast from there, and I took my wife and daughter more because I was, you know, taking a ride out of town for a day trip, and I thought they'd enjoy it getting out of town. But we all actually went to a number of seminars, and, you know, I have to admit, I think of myself as pretty on top of things. I'm involved with, you know, all kinds of things that are going on and follow them, and I'm always looking for the latest and greatest whatever. But I was overwhelmed by how much stuff I did not know and how much expertise was in these rooms, and I thought, wow, this was actually a relatively small show in Orlando. It was at Rollins College, and, you know, I thought about that, and I thought about, wow, you know, to go to a show that would be, you know, national, draw people from, you know, probably all over the United States and beyond, that's pretty damn tempting to someone like me. And I actually, when you guys were talking about the numbers, I'm thinking I would actually expect multiples of those numbers over time as these things succeed, because there's so many people involved in whether it is blogging or podcasting or supplying, you know, on the business side of all that.
And the other element to that is people are so passionate about it. It's not just even if you just do it for a hobby, most people that I know it's not a very casual hobby. It's something that just sucks you in and you're very, very serious about, and you spend time, money, and effort. As Tim said, you're surprised at how much time people have to, to tweet and podcast and blog and everything else that they do. So to be able to get together, that just the social aspect of it, and meet other people who are as passionate about these mediums as you are, is an amazing thing. And I say that from personal experience because that's why I started BlogWorld, because I wanted to go meet my blogger friends and and then learn how to make my blog better as well. But it's amazing to walk down the aisle and see, and there's this celebrity aspect as well. So it's amazing to walk down the aisle and see, Robert Scoble here and Doc Searles there and Glenn Reynolds here and Gary Vaynerchuk there, and it's just like, oh my God, I can't believe all these people are in the same place.
Yep. I've got a question for you, Rick, and it kind of goes along those lines and just kind of a free flow conversation here. But one of the things we always had to balance with podcasting was, especially between seemed year 3 and 4, it was really when it happened, is balancing the people that are there because they want to use it as a business or a branding opportunity or make money and want to make their livelihood, and the people that just do it because they, a guy that does the Boston Red Sox podcast, but he's an accountant just because he loves the Sox, but never has any intention of making money or
right.
quit his job. Is that something you guys have had to kind of deal with as well?
Yeah, I mean, we're very, very mindful of this, and Tim, I'd be curious too. You and I have talked a little bit about this before, how we lived parallel lives for a little while. But, when I, again, first had the idea to do BlogWorld, my idea of the blogosphere was political blogs. My blog was called The Real Ugly American. It was a blog about politics. I like arguing about politics. I think that's fun. I didn't have any concept. I didn't know who Robert Scoble or Doc Searles or TechCrunch were. I'd never heard of them before. And so all of us, new media content creators, we live in these little silos of the blogosphere and have no awareness of the people outside. At least that's how it was for us 2 years ago. At Tim's event, I saw his podcasting community. It seemed, the kids who do the Harry Potter podcast knew the priest who did the podcast and knew, you and Spence, the Crazy Scotsman podcast. They all knew each other.
Yeah.
And where at a blog, BlogWorld, you could have Glenn Reynolds, the Instapundit, standing next to, Mike Arrington, and neither one would be aware of the other.
Yeah, and I think that has to do entirely with iTunes, just because that was there seemed to always be, even before iTunes with the Yahoo directory or whatever, a central place where you could find them all, whereas blogs doesn't seem to have that. I know there's blog directories, but nothing quite as popular as iTunes is itself, and so I think everybody's kind of in that same boat. Maybe that was why it happened that way.
Well, that's a very good point, Tim, because there are tons of blog directories, but they're typically siloed. So there's a blog directory if you're a political blogger, there's a blog directory if you're a sports blogger, and so on. So you never get outside your genre. But anyway, what we were originally talking about is hobbyists versus professionals,
right?
Which the bigger question is the mix overall. Hobbyists versus professionals, men versus women. And again, all those different communities being represented, and it's always been our goal to get as many of those people and as much diversity as possible involved, because that brings energy from every one of those segments and gets people to meet people they've never met or were aware of before. And it's one thing to go and meet somebody that you admire and look up to as a peer. That's one rewarding experience. But it's a whole other rewarding experience to say, let's say I'm a political blogger and I get to meet a sports podcaster at the show, and I'd never heard of him before, but we've still got so many things in common. That's another type of rewarding experience. And same thing, the hobbyist versus the professional, or the enterprise user versus the individual. The truth is, and I know this is true for your event in the past too, Tim, how do we monetize our content is usually the most important and most popular track that we do. And bloggers always talk about corporate America doesn't know how to talk to new media content creators. But at the same time, new media content creators don't know how to talk to corporate America. And so by getting them together with each other, we kind of start that conversation.
Yeah.
Guys,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I wonder if I could interrupt for just a second because I think Jesse has called us back, and I want to give him a chance to plug his blog. Jesse, is that you? Are you back?
Yeah, that's me. I'm back. My son hung up the phone right when I was talking.
Just at the very important point. But go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to know if I was still able to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell us where to find your blog.
Well, I blog on my MySpace, myspace.com/PRPACLT, and also I blog for Eastside Boxing.
Okay.
And that's eastsideboxing.com.
Great.
Cool. So it's a sports blog.
Yeah, the Eastside Boxing one, and my MySpace I just blog about life. But yeah, Eastside Boxing I usually the last blog I did was about the De La Hoya Pacquiao match.
Mhm.
So check that out.
Are you making any money as a blogger?
No.
Would you like to?
Yes.
All right. Have you ever thought about attending one of these shows?
Yeah, absolutely. My problem is, I don't know if I could get away to Vegas.
It's business. You can say it's business. Business trip, honey.
Yeah,
that's where I'm going.
Yeah.
Bring her along. That's even better.
We'll bring her and the kid. That's a lot of tickets. That's pricey tickets. But I mean, it's definitely. I would love to go, but I mean, I'll just have to see how I look financially to go.
Well, guys, let me ask you a question. What can you suggest to Jesse? You know, it's a long time between now and October. Maybe you guys can offer some suggestions or some resources where Jesse can get more information about maybe starting to make his blogs turn even a little bit of coin, and also just where to get more information about improving his blogs.
Well, there's all sorts of sources out there. ProBlogger is one that I would start with. Darren Rouse writes great tips on how to monetize your blog. Another one would be Copyblogger. Brian Clark is a very smart guy. And another one would be Shoe Money. And another one would be Zach Johnson. And if you started with those guys, and those will lead you to other resources that can teach you, if you want to monetize your content, how to do that.
Okay, sounds good.
I'm always surprised at the ideas that people have. I'm still, I've been doing podcasting for about as long as people have been doing it, which is 4 or 5 years now, a little over 5 years. And I still learn from people, that I meet in the hallway or just, in between a session about how they're doing it and some unique ideas. So my thing is always if you could pick up 1 or 2 new ideas at these shows, then it's probably worth your time.
I'd add a couple names to that. Chris Brogan, chrisbrogan.com. I follow him very carefully. There's a group that, and Tim, I don't know if you're in this or not, LinkedIn bloggers.
I'm not. That's the first I've heard of it. See, I just learned something new myself. I'll have to go check it out.
Is
Interesting.
Perez Hilton a successful blogger?
He's a pretty damn successful one. He makes a lot of money at it, wouldn't you say, guys?
Yep. It's not for everybody, but he's making money, I'm sure.
Well, he's
millions category.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an important point to mention Perez because he's one of several people who parlayed his new media success into traditional media success.
Mm-hmm.
And that means of getting a traditional media gig didn't used to exist. It used to be much harder to break through, and that's why, or one of the reasons why we all love new media so much is it's based on ability. And if you write great content or create great content in audio or video, you'll get recognized. And I know that's all relative. Not everybody might think Perez is a great blogger, but obviously a lot of people do. And enough people do that traditional media saw fit to pay him a lot of money. So I don't think you would have ever seen Perez Hilton on the E! channel before new media existed.
Absolutely not. Or I mean, does YouTube fall into that category, the new media? Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
So, and then I mean, look at the stars that made, because I know the Japanese
Rick,
kid
you got to get Tia Tequila.
Lip sync.
Right.
The Backstreet Boys is making millions off Pepsi right now for the Pepsi commercial.
Yep.
So,
yeah, Tia Tequila is another perfect example.
Yeah. Oh, she's from MySpace, right?
Yep.
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 Yeah. I mean, yeah, I just think new media, it's great in general, and it opened a lot of doors for people that didn't have that. It made the opening of doors easier for people like Perez Hilton, and hopefully myself one day. But
there you go.
We'll see. Thank you, guys.
Well, thanks for calling back, Jesse. We appreciate it. And if you missed any of the names or the sites that were thrown out, the show will be available as an archive within about 10 minutes of it ending. So you can always catch up there. And I've added Jesse's blogs to the live web chat that accompanies Mr. Media. So go and check out his sites, myspace.com/PRPACLT. And also eastsideboxing.com. So we appreciate you calling. I'm glad you called back, and keep the kid away from the phone.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Jesse. Bye-bye. Yeah, you know, you hear about the success of someone like Perez Hilton, and of course, not everyone can or will achieve that level of success. He's very single-minded in what he does. It's gossip. It's about the names of. He has the names in his blog of people who are at the very top of the searches. Paris Hilton, Britney Spears, and not everyone's going to do that. But it does say to you, there is an opportunity there if you find the right niche and you have the right content.
New media certainly made it easier for people to have a voice. The trouble is there's so much out there. How do you get attention for it? When we first started the podcast show, when we first announced it, there was probably 300 podcasts. Now there's over 150,000, I think. And it's probably the same way, Rick, with blogs. I mean, it's probably doubled last year alone. I mean, so the other thing, besides how to make money, that we get that are really popular sessions at the show are, how do I just get noticed?
Right.
So anyway, I don't know if it's been the same for you, Rick.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for me, I couldn't believe that my blog did get noticed. The first, I'm like, well, how do those people find me, and why are they reading my blog? Who cares what I have to say? And 5 people turn into 10 and 20, and it's amazing how people can find you. But there's no doubt that understanding how to promote your content is absolutely vitally important. And a lot of people don't understand how to promote their content. So that's certainly a very important aspect of it.
Well, why don't we try this for people who are listening? And we have people who listen live, but more people will actually listen on the archive in the weeks and months to come. Tell us about like the last edition of each separate show and what kind of content and guests that you had. Maybe Tim, you could take that first. Tell folks a little bit about the last New Media Expo and what they would have found.
Sure. So at the last one, we had 5 tracks, and we kind of tried to divide it up as best we could between a 101 track that was for beginners, just about what an RSS feed was, how you create one. Then we had a track for organizations like universities, nonprofits, charities, that sort of thing. And then we had a track strictly on monetization. We had one strictly on the technical aspects and equipment and things like those. And even with 2.5 days, it's impossible to cover everything. You do as good a job as you can, trying to get a good basis. But in the end, you hope that again people pick up 1 or 2 things that they can use for their shows. And so, I love taking somebody who's never spoken before, but I think that has a great idea and has something to say, and giving them a shot and letting them teach for an hour. I think there's a real value in that. But then at the same time, we had people like the Jason Van Ordens of the world and people, and Paul Culligan and Michael Gohagen, who have been around for a long time and kind of talked about their history and how they got to where they were too. So we try to put a track together that is a little bit of something for everyone, but you can attend any session in any track. So you may go to a couple monetization, then you may go to how to record better audio, and then you may go to one that talks about marketing with Twitter. So it's a lot to take in, but we try to give you ideas, something to think about for going back home with your own show.
And Rick?
Yeah, we had a similar approach, and Tim is right. At one way, there's no way you can possibly cover all of the potential topics and all of the content and all of the subjects that people want to learn about. And on the other hand, it's easy to get overwhelmed. We had, during Saturday and Sunday, 10 consecutive sessions or concurrent sessions, and it's just sometimes it's really hard to pick which one do I want to go to because there's 3 or 4 different things. And so, like Tim, we had a track on monetization, we had a track on new media, we had a track on an introductory track, we had a track on audio and video and podcasting. Something we did different this year and that we're going to continue certainly next year is citizen journalism. More and more people are interested in learning more kind of traditional journalism practices to apply to their blogging or their podcasting. So we'll continue that, and that track was actually taught by journalism professors. And then we have these community-oriented tracks as well. So we have one for the military bloggers, one for the sports bloggers. We had one an event called God Blog Con for religious bloggers that's at the event. And looks like this year we'll have one for medical bloggers as well. And last year we had a track for real estate bloggers. They approached us and said, hey, we want to do a thing just for real estate agents. And we did that for them, and that was very successful as well. So it's overwhelming. This last year, Tim said they had 62 speakers, and I know we had talked about this ahead of time. He had got a handle on his the issue of having too many speakers. We tried to do that this year, not so successfully. We had 150 speakers in 2007. This year we had 300 speakers.
Oh, my.
And, that's just because I couldn't tell people no. So
going to
take that out of my hands this year and let somebody else do that.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you, while you were talking, I mentioned that I had attended this Blog Orlando conference, which was basically an unconference, very loosely organized. And I found the list I had made, and I wrote a note to myself about how it got ridiculous after a while, of all the sites that the various speakers talked about. And like I said, I like to think that I'm fairly on top of things, and I try new things when they happen. But these are the sites that were introduced to me at this one-day conference. Awayfind, Plurk, BrightType, My Drop Card, Context, Photonauts, Fiddler, 2, that's the number 2 mobile, iSpot, Animoto, Tumblr, Havari Project, My Drop-In, Filterbox, FeedHub, 8RSS, Yahoo Pipe, Addictomatic, Pop Ego, Social Thing, Gizio. I mean, some of these I've encountered. Some of them I haven't even had time to. But the point is, there is so much information out there, and so many things that might be useful to you. That that's why I'm excited. I'm going to make every effort to be in Vegas this year for the show. It just excites the hell out of me to find all this information out, and this would be a good way too, so that Rick, you and I had a phone conversation earlier this year, but Tim, this is the first time we've spoken, and I imagine if we're in the same room and have a conversation, I'll know to say Bourquin and not Bourquin.
No problem.
How has the instead of that, have you been surprised by what emerged at your shows each year? Were there things that you heard about for the first time at your show, like this past year, that a few months later has become very big?
Tim?
Rick? Is it Rick? Okay. A couple things. There's always new companies. I mean, there's one that was at our show for the first time called Podcast Tune-Up. That's got some good things in mind. I mean, when I think of podcasting, we think we've been doing this for 5 years. There's not a lot that's coming out new, but there is. They're not always gigantic corporate companies that are coming out with a new way to podcast, but smaller companies that are new ways of tagging your stuff so it's easier to find. So there are a couple of companies there that were there for the first time that were big companies like Sony Vegas and Microsoft Zune. So I see two things. I see smaller companies trying new ways to get people into podcasting, and then I also see some of the bigger companies who hadn't given us a shot before that see, okay, podcasting's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. And now pretty much everybody knows that you don't need an iPod to listen to a podcast, although once in a great while I still get that, believe it or not. So there's lots of companies starting things, but I always have to remember, too, that there's somebody probably learning about the word podcast for the first time today. Probably hundreds, if not thousands of people. So,
that's right.
There's and same with blog. You think blog, people probably know what that word is, and a lot of people don't still. So there's, we talk about 3,500 people. Maybe 10 years from now, it will be 35,000. Maybe it will be Macworld size just because there are people learning about it for the first time now.
I wanted Tim to go first because I had something for sure that surprised me this year, and maybe I shouldn't have been, but the amount of people at our show who were on Twitter was unbelievable, and typically, I've considered our crowd, I think, to be a little less technical than you'd see at Tim's show, just because the nature of blogging is you don't need to know as much. But I would say half of our attendees were on Twitter when the show started, and probably 70 to 80% were on Twitter by the time the show ended. And it was people said we should have called it Twitter World. I mean, it was overwhelming. And I'd seen that same phenomenon at South by Southwest. I just didn't think that was going to happen at our event this year, and it did. It was amazing, which shows the power of these mediums, and Twitter is definitely one of them. It's the latest one that people are excited about. I know Robert Scoville's trying to get people excited about Friend Feed. I don't know if that will ever take off the way he thinks it will, but and also Facebook. We did a couple of sessions on Facebook this year because we thought, this is something people would be interested in, and people wanted a lot more information about Facebook and other social networking sites, so we're certainly going to do more about that next year, and I guess I was a little surprised about that.
Does BlogWorld and New Media Expo have a Twitter feed that people can follow?
Yes, and we actually have two. We're trying to figure that out right now. That's one of the things that we're trying to figure out. BlogWorld Expo has a Twitter feed called BlogWorld, which is at BlogWorld, and Tim, New Media Expo has one called at New Media Expo, correct?
Yeah, we've got one. We actually have two. At New Media Expo and at the New Media Expo. For whatever reason, we decided to split off one that would be with updates throughout the day just for people that were at the show, which is kind of counterintuitive, I guess, for Twitter. We should probably combine them, but we'll have to get in touch with Evan Williams and see how we combine these things. I don't know that it's been done yet.
And what about each of you individually? Do you have Twitter feeds, and do you want to? If so, do you want to give that out so people can follow you if they're interested?
I just tweet at BlogWorld, so what you see is either about the show or some random thought that I throw out there. So,
I've got Tim Bourquin, but I don't do a whole lot of updating there. I was just doing mostly from New Media Expo, but I'll have to admit I have not, and I've blogged about this too, is that I don't get Twitter as much as these people do. I see the value, I see the reasons why it's succeeding. But I have yet to really find how it works well for me. And, every time I blog about that, I get some people who are just livid with me because I haven't figured out how fantastic it is yet.
Well,
but, it took me a while to get it as well, and it was really at South by Southwest that it clicked for me, because at an event is one of the great uses for Twitter, because you can see where all your friends are or people that you want to meet. You can find out instantly where they are. I'm at this party or I'm at this booth, and you can go and see them. It's very useful. And so, and Tim, I mean, even though, you haven't been converted yet. I mean, you guys have almost 6,000 followers on Twitter. I mean, so
yeah,
it definitely works.
It's I mean, certainly as if any feed or any Twitter is going to have a lot of followers, I would think it would be new media related. For sure.
Well, let me. I was curious about that because I mean, I have a Twitter feed. And if anyone wants to follow, it's Andelman. Just twitter.com/ANDELMAN. And where I started seeing the value was when I discovered twitterfeed.com, where you can, if you have a blog, you can put the feed, the RSS feed, into Twitter feed, and it will update automatically your Twitter feed with whatever you've posted on a blog. And in my case, it's the Mr. Media blog, and I make my living as a writer, so whenever something posts on one of my writing blogs, it goes up there. And I found it's amazing how many people find their way to the blogs because of that. And lately, this is the thing I just don't get. I mean, 10 or 15 people seem to be and that's a small number because I'm not a business per se, but 10 to 15 people seem to be finding their way to my Twitter feed daily and adding it, and I'm delighted, but it's amazing. Whereas you mentioned friend feed, and I started using that because somebody was complaining that I had too many things in my signature, find me at Twitter, find me at LinkedIn, blah, 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 Facebook, and they were saying, oh, you just put it all in one place. I haven't found it to be useful at all.
Yeah. Same thing with Plurk. When it first came out, and I just like saying the name Plurk. All of them even Twitter sounds funny. It's weird that you get used to the word Twitter. But a lot of the techies were really enamored with Plurk when it came out. And when I saw it, it was just like, this is too convoluted and complicated. I don't get it. Twitter is much more simple and easy to understand. And again, same thing with friend feed. I know Robert Scoble beats that drum daily, and I haven't been converted to that one yet. So
here's my thing. Since we're talking about Twitter, I'll just throw it out there. Rick, does it seem to you that we're getting further? I mean, we were talking about lesser attention spans in this new media world. There's so much media out there that, right now it's at 140 characters. Somebody's going to come out with a service where you got to say something in 10 characters or less, and everybody's going to flock to that. There's this dearth of people now. I see people's blogs now that their blog is just their Twitter feed, and I think what I love about the blogosphere and podcasting is it's this discussion that goes on. There's you go into it, and there's a lot of detail, and there's a talk about it. Twitter seems so frenetic to me. Maybe it's just my personality is that I much more enjoy the long, well-thought blog post than I do the 140-character rant. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So this can be a really long discussion just on this. And so Twitter is the latest buzz. And so I think it's so funny. Hugh Hewitt is a nationally syndicated radio host. He's a political talk show guy. And he was one of the first mainstream political guys to really get blogging. And he wrote a book called Blog. And he's actually responsible for me starting my blog. So he didn't get Twitter. He was at BlogWorld this year, went to a session, and heard a talk on Twitter, and he came out going, wow. He goes, now I think I get it. And he, for the last 3 weeks on his radio show, he talks about Twitter every single day. And he is trying to convert every single, political operative he knows to Twitter. And there was an article in the Washington Post by a lady who obviously did not understand it at all, but she was just enamored with the technology, the idea of it. And so you're going to get a bunch of people who jump on that bandwagon, just like with blogging, just like with podcasting, and then people will jump off. And so Twitter's just benefiting from that. I think it's going to get staying power, but yeah, people stop blogging to tweet. And I relate new media content creators very much to music. I'm a guitar player, so many people in this world get a guitar for the birthday or for Christmas or whatever. They want to play guitar, or they want to be a drummer or a saxophone player. It doesn't matter, any musical instrument. They get the instrument and they play it for a week. They find out that it's hard, they're not that good, and they quit. And it just goes in the closet, and that's it. And it's the same way with any form of new media. They think it'll be neat to be on Twitter. They think it'll be neat to have a blog, and maybe they always wanted to be a writer, or they always thought they could be a sportscaster, so they start a podcast. It turns out they're not that good, or it's a lot more work than they thought it would be, and eventually they quit. But more and more people find out that actually they are good at it, and they keep practicing, and they keep getting better. And that's where that's the beautiful thing about new media for me. And I know I've gotten far afield from there, but there's short form things are good, long form things are good. So I like watching a sitcom, and I like reading a novel too. So
Bob, do you find that people say your show should be shorter, or because they're getting so used to this short form content, or do you not see that?
I don't actually. It's interesting. The show, when I started doing it, and I think this week it's been a year on Blog Talk Radio, and just about coming up on 2 years doing the podcast total. The show actually has been getting longer. I originally thought 30 minutes was a long time, and what I found is that people like to talk and people like to listen. I'm very surprised. I mean, if you had told me a year ago that the three of us would be talking for an hour, which is where we're going to wind up in a few minutes, I would have been astonished. But because
you haven't heard me talk that often, Bob.
And I mean no disrespect to my guests, but blogging, the thing people always hammer home: keep it short, keep it short, keep it short. The podcast, I don't know. I guess it's because like a lot of people download it via iTunes, and they take it in the car with them, or they take it on the train, or they listen to wherever they listen to it, and they can listen to it at any time. It's like if it's a topic that they're interested in, they want it to go on. They want that texture and they want that detail. And blogging, it's a matter of you get that thought out and you focus on it, and then you move on to the next thing, because I guess the attraction is that people are ADD, or I don't know.
Well, I hope
certainly.
Just go ahead, Rick.
Well, certainly modern-day advertising and video games and things like Twitter are definitely raising our ADD level for everybody. There's no doubt about that. So.
Now, I have a question for you guys before we wrap up from the web chat. This is actually from within Blog Talk Radio. It's from BTR Demos. I don't know if you're going to be able to answer this question, but let me pose it. We were talking about Twitter. What about people who build large but random networks? How effective is it to just add random friends on Twitter? Does not targeting your audience make your tweets less clickable?
That's a good question.
Tim?
Yeah, I mean, I think most people, in a lot of sense, that they treat, let's face it, Twitter to a certain extent as a popularity contest. I mean, everybody loves to get followed. Hey, give some more following, and the more followers, the better. And people love to wish someday that they could have 14,000 followers like Scoble has. Now, I also know that a couple of people are following 14,000 people, and I gotta wonder what the usefulness of a network like that is, because if you're at a show or something, tell me if I'm wrong, Rick, or Bob. And do at this point you can't have certain followers only come to your phone as SMS messages, right? It's either all or nothing. Is that correct?
No, you can select individuals.
Okay, see,
you can block people.
I need to get more on Twitter and find out these. Now, if I could say, I want to follow all these people, but I want to get these 10 people on my phone so that I'm really updated in real time and don't have to have my laptop with me. Then certainly I could find that a little more useful. But just getting followers for following's sake, I don't see the usefulness of that, and I think that's an issue people are going to deal with down the road. And Facebook too. I add everybody. Everybody wants to be my friend on Facebook. I add. Now,
right,
am I going to regret that down the road? Maybe. I don't know.
You know what? So again, go ahead, Bob.
I was just going to say quickly, I think it depends on what you're doing. I mean, I add everyone who wants to be my friend on Facebook also, and Twitter. Like I said, people are coming to it now. I'm looking to spread the word about Mr. Media, And every time you do it now, they're all connected now. Twitter and Facebook and other things are all connected. So every time you tweet on Twitter, it shows up on Facebook. So all of my 1,700 friends on Facebook get that tweet, and they know, okay, Bob's interviewing, Rick and Tim tonight, so they know about it. So to that degree, I'm happy to add anyone who wants to be added. But I understand if you're not doing it from that perspective, then you don't want all those people who want you to get you into multi-level marketing, for example.
So exactly, and so just like any other form of new media, a blog or a podcast or a video, Twitter can be used for multiple different reasons, and Facebook for that matter, or any one of these social media tools. So some people use Twitter to promote or sell whatever it is they're selling, and some people use it just to talk to their personal friends. Some people use it to drive traffic to their blog. Some people use it for a combination of those things. So you can't categorize it in one particular thing. Now, Tim, you and I were unique in this thing because we run, a new media event. So we have all these people who are using all of these applications. And honestly, in my personal life, I'm a private person. I don't talk about, my wife or my family or those things. I just don't do that. And so, but at the same time, for BlogWorld and New Media Expo, we have to have that presence, and we have to let people know what we're doing all the time, because that's how they get their news. That's how they want to receive that information. So I'm amazed by some of the things people put on Facebook or MySpace, or I would never put that information about myself on a social networking site. And then there's different levels. I call MySpace the ghetto of social networks, Facebook the suburbs, and LinkedIn the Beverly Hills, and I treat them accordingly.
That's interesting. I've never heard that. That's good though.
I like that. Somebody may not appreciate it, but I got a kick out of that. I like that. Listen, we're gonna lose our live feed in a minute, so I'm gonna say, folks, you can learn more about the combined 2009 BlogWorld and New Media Expo, which is scheduled for October 15 to 17, 2009, in Las Vegas. Hopefully you get to meet Mr. Media there. I hope to be there. You can go to the show's website, www.blogworldexpo.com. That's all one word. Well, in Internet talk it is, blogworldexpo.com. And Rick and Tim, thank you both so much for joining us. It was a fascinating conversation, and I think we're all going to benefit from having one show to focus on rather than two.
Thank you, Bob.
All right, guys.
Hey, and if I could add one quick thing, Tim, in particular, I found a great new tool for Twitter from Jim Turner, who's @Genuine on Twitter, called TweetDeck. TweetDeck.
I have heard of that. I haven't checked that yet.
And you can categorize all your different followers, and it makes it much more easy to digest if you've got thousands of people that you're following. So you can, put the 10 people you want to follow the most, and then maybe this group of folks here and this group of folks there. It's an amazing tool. So.
Okay. Good news. Thanks.
Cool. And one more tip, folks. So if you missed any of them, come back and listen to the archive once, twice, 6 times. Guys, thanks so much for joining us today on Mr. Media. I appreciate it and hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Right. Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye-bye. Bye. And folks, of course, for more interviews with blogger and new media experts, surf over to our main website, www.mrmedia.com. That's where you can listen to my earlier conversations with the men and women behind MediaBistro.com, MrSkin.com, CrooksandLiars.com, SticksOfFire.com, Webs.com, Sci-Fi Portal, the WB.com, Magnify.net, Eats.com, MonkeySee.com, WonderHowTo.com, and many more. And please think about writing an online review of Mr. Media, casting a vote for Mr. Media, or marking Mr. Media as one of your favorites. Whether you listen on Blog Talk Radio, digital, and many, many others. I lost my page here. If you've got an idea for a guest, please email me directly at bob@andelman.com or follow me on Twitter. It's twitter.com/ANDELMAN. Thanks so much for joining us today. I always appreciate when you give a little piece of your time back to us and spend it here. Come back soon. Bye, everybody.